I managed to collect more than 160 unusual historical photos that you missed. Be sure to write your impression in the comments. On March 27, 1968, Yuri Gagarin and test pilot Vladimir Seryogin died when their MiG training jet crashed near Novosolovo. The first person in space was killed during a routine flight less than 7 years after his historic mission. This 1906 photograph shows 6 female revolutionaries imprisoned at the Akatui penal colony in Siberia. Maria Spiridonova and Alexandra Izmailovich later survived decades of persecution, only to be executed together by the Soviet secret police near Oryol in 1941. In 1944, a chaplain blesses the crew of Fifinella, an American B-17 Flying Fortress, before a combat mission from Britain. The bomber belonged to the 91st Bombardment Group, whose crews flew deep into Nazi-controlled Europe through fighters, flak, and freezing air. American troops inspect the entrance to a German underground fortress in Cherbourg, France, on June 27, 1944. Hidden inside the cliffs, these tunnels protected soldiers, weapons, and supplies from Allied bombing. This snaggletooth snake eel can grow up to 3 feet long and lives in tropical waters as shallow as 16 feet. Found near Puerto Vallarta in 2018, this specimen looks even more terrifying because exposure caused its eyes to bulge. This terrifying clown was actually performer Charlie Smith, photographed at a costume party in the 1930s. Despite his demonic makeup, he was trying to comfort the frightened toddler beside him. Whelan lies in ruins after German bombers attacked on September 1, 1939, killing hundreds of civilians. The raid struck a hospital and is widely considered one of the first major attacks of the Second World War. A survivor of a sunken German U-boat is blindfolded before being taken prisoner in 1943. The blindfold stopped him from seeing secret details of the Allied warship that rescued him. Members of an ethnographic expedition pose with local guides in the Russian Far East between 1900 and 1902. Their sled, rifles, and heavy clothing reveal the harsh conditions they faced while documenting remote communities. Moscow's Kalinin Prospect in 1986 glowed with giant window displays built into government high-rises. The avenue was renamed Novy Arbat after the Soviet Union collapsed, but its famous Aeroflot globe still survives. When Mount St. Helens erupted on May 18, 1980, its blast flattened about 230 square miles of forest in minutes. This photo shows the aftermath 3 weeks later, with millions of trees snapped and scattered like matchsticks. During the Empire State Building's construction in 1930, workers balanced on narrow steel beams more than 1,000 feet above Manhattan. The skyscraper rose in just 410 days, while several thousand workers completed more than 4 floors each week. In Paris, protesters demanded a boycott of the 1978 World Cup, warning that Argentina's military dictatorship would use football as propaganda. Their banner declared, "No football between concentration camps," while political prisoners were being tortured near the stadiums. In 1917, suffragist Kate Heffelfinger was jailed for picketing the White House and demanding votes for women. After a hunger strike and brutal force-feeding, she was released on November 27th, so weak that she needed help walking. In 1938, Japanese soldiers forced Chinese prisoners into a pit and prepared to bury them alive. The photograph captures one of the brutal methods used to torture and murder civilians during Japan's invasion of China. On April 21, 1996, this targeting footage reportedly captured Chechen leader Dzhokhar Dudayev moments before his death. Russian forces traced his satellite phone signal and killed him with missiles while he was speaking to a Russian politician. These bamboo aircraft were Japanese decoys found on Okinawa in 1945, built to fool American pilots into attacking fake targets. Their frames were covered with woven mats, saving real aircraft and drawing bombs away from military positions. American bombers strike Japanese transport ships in Simpson Harbor, Rabaul, a vital supply base in the Pacific. Repeated raids destroyed ships, aircraft, and fuel stores, helping isolate more than 100,000 Japanese troops. In the 1920s, a worker at a Soviet felt boot workshop presents his finished work to a production clerk. The clerk records the output by hand, linking every completed pair of Valenki directly to the worker's pay. The white boy is Santiago McKin, a child captured by Chiricahua Apaches and photographed in Geronimo's camp in 1886. He learned their language and reportedly cried when soldiers returned him to his family. In 1909, Baltimore undercover detectives hid their faces behind white masks to keep criminals from recognizing them. The only unmasked man was the captured suspect, displayed beside the officers who had secretly hunted him down. This rare photograph from 1994 shows former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev beside Vladimir Putin, then an obscure official in St. Petersburg. 6 years later, Putin became president of Russia, while Gorbachev watched the country move far from the reforms that defined his rule. Members of a secret society pose in Latin America during the 1920s, wearing skull-marked robes that hid their identities and rank. Such groups used coded symbols, private oaths, and closed ceremonies to protect their rituals from outsiders. In 1948, a blind boy in Rome who had lost both hands during the war learned to read Braille with his lips. By feeling each raised dot against his mouth, he turned touch into words without fingers or sight. In 1960, a Fairchild C-119 flying boxcar caught the Discoverer 14 capsule as it parachuted toward the Pacific. Inside was the first satellite film ever recovered from orbit, secretly captured by America's Corona spy program. Terrified actress Sophia Loren hides inside her car as fans surround her during the Rome to San Remo rally on April 9, 1956. One fan smashed the windshield, leaving Loren trapped behind the shattered glass. This rare psychiatric hospital photograph shows a patient restrained in a straitjacket and left facing a bare wall. Such restraints immobilized the arms behind the body, but prolonged use could cause panic, breathing problems, and serious injury. In 1935, hungry people searched through garbage for scraps as the Great Depression left millions without work or reliable food. Soup kitchens helped, but many families still survived on discarded vegetables, stale bread, and whatever they could find. This section of the Trans-Siberian Railway was nearly restored after the Ufa train disaster in 1989. A leaking gas pipeline created a massive fireball as two passenger trains passed, killing 575 people, including 181 children. A 16-inch naval shell lies in the yard of a damaged home in Indian Head, Maryland in 1916. The enormous projectile weighed about 1 ton, showing how dangerously close the town stood to the nearby naval weapons testing ground. During China's Four Pests campaign in the late 1950s, families killed huge numbers of sparrows because the government blamed them for eating grain. With the birds gone, crop-eating insects multiplied, helping turn the campaign into an ecological disaster. On August 5, 1910, the steamship Princess May struck a reef near Sentinel Island, Alaska, leaving its bow suspended high above the water. All passengers and crew escaped safely, and the vessel was later pulled free, repaired, and returned to service. Wrecked German Tiger tanks lie trapped in the ruins of Villers-Bocage after British forces captured the town on August 5, 1944. Weeks earlier, Tiger commander Michael Whitman had destroyed a British column here in one of Normandy's most notorious armored ambushes. Jim Killer Miller was an outlaw, hired assassin, crime boss, and former lawman linked to at least 12 killings. He wore steel plates beneath his long coat and favored a shotgun, but a lynch mob ended his reign in 1909. A young boy shines an elderly man's shoes in a park in Santa Cruz de la Sierra, Bolivia. Photographed on January 15, 2010, the scene reveals how child labor remained a visible part of daily life across Latin American cities. This is Kicking Bird, a Kiowa war chief photographed around 1870, who reportedly killed a United States cavalry corporal with a lance in battle. He later became a powerful peace advocate, pushing his people to negotiate with settlers instead of fighting. John Jacob Astor IV, the richest passenger on the Titanic, placed his pregnant wife in a lifeboat after his own request to join her was refused. He stayed aboard and died in the sinking, and his body was recovered 7 days later. Den Fujita, the founder of McDonald's Japan, controversially claimed that eating hamburgers would make Japanese people taller, fairer, and more Western-looking. By 1986, his fast food empire had already transformed how millions of people in Japan ate. This mugshot shows 18-year-old Nicolae Ceausescu after his arrest for communist agitation in 1936. 33 years later, he ruled Romania as a brutal dictator before being overthrown and executed on Christmas Day in 1989. A woman repairs a car in Philadelphia in June 1943 when wartime labor shortages opened skilled jobs to women. Female mechanics kept civilian and military vehicles running while millions of men served overseas. This photograph, taken at London Zoo around 1870, shows the only quagga ever photographed alive. She died in 1872, and the last known quagga died at Amsterdam Zoo in 1883, making this rare zebra subspecies extinct. In 1925, inventor Hugo Gernsback unveiled the isolator, a wooden helmet that blocked office noise and narrowed the wearer's vision to prevent distractions. The air inside became dangerously stale within 15 minutes, so an oxygen tank was connected to keep the user awake. On June 5, 1976, the newly built Teton Dam collapsed during its first filling, becoming the tallest dam ever breached. The flood released nearly 80 billion gallons, killed 11 people, and damaged or destroyed thousands of homes across eastern Idaho. This death row photo shows former United States Army Sergeant Isaac Jackson Hurt, convicted of kidnapping, raping, and murdering 5-year-old Yumiko Nagayama in Okinawa in 1955. Her murder triggered the island's first major protests against the United States military presence. These dark marks on the ceiling of Yoganin Temple in Kyoto are said to be bloodstains from warriors who died during the siege of Fushimi Castle in 1600. Its blood-soaked floorboards were later moved to the temple and installed overhead to honor the dead. In the 1930s, Soviet pioneers publicly named classmates who attended church on Easter. The blackboard turned private faith into evidence, exposing children to shame during the state's aggressive campaign against religion. Soviet KGB officers seize a suspected spy near Moscow in 1985. The rare photograph captures the moment they lift him off the ground and carry him away. In 1978, serial killer John Wayne Gacy was photographed shaking hands with First Lady Rosalind Carter. The pin on his jacket marked Secret Service clearance, while police had not yet discovered the bodies buried beneath his house. A Jewish couple and their child walked through Berlin in 1941, forced to wear yellow stars that exposed them to public persecution. Nazi law defined Jewish identity by ancestry, meaning even baptized Christians with Jewish grandparents could be stripped of citizenship and targeted. A decorated German veteran teaches Hitler youth boys to fire a Panzerfaust, a single-use weapon built to destroy tanks at close range. The badges on his sleeve mark enemy tanks he personally destroyed. In 1889, these Aboriginal prisoners were photographed in chains outside a stone jail in Western Australia. Many Indigenous Australians were arrested under colonial laws that controlled their movement and labor, turning prisons into a brutal source of forced workers. Danish resistance fighters search and detain 2 German soldiers during the liberation of Denmark in 1945. After years of secret sabotage and underground warfare, resistance units emerged openly as German forces surrendered, and Danish towns reclaimed control. This 1935 photograph from the Belgian Congo shows a woman covered in elaborate scarification, including ancient swastika-shaped designs on her shoulders. Long before Nazi Germany corrupted the symbol, many cultures used it, while African scar patterns could express beauty, identity, status, and community. During the Vietnam War, United States aircraft sprayed millions of gallons of Agent Orange to destroy forests and expose enemy forces. Its toxic dioxin still contaminates parts of Vietnam and is linked to cancers and severe birth defects. Ireland's Magdalen laundries confined thousands of women, including unmarried mothers, forcing many to work without pay under harsh and secretive conditions. Children were often separated from their mothers and adopted without consent, and the last laundry remained open until 1996. Around 1900, this hunter posed with a black bear carried across his shoulders and a rifle resting against its body. Such trophy photographs were carefully staged to prove a successful hunt before cameras became common in everyday life. During the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, children hauled paving stones to build barricades against German forces. These street defenses blocked armored vehicles and protected resistance routes during the 63-day battle for the city. In 1953, a volcanic mud flow destroyed the Tangiwai Railway Bridge moments before an express train reached it. The locomotive and 6 carriages plunged into the Whangaihou River, killing 151 people in New Zealand's deadliest rail disaster. On May 23, 1928, workers displayed a 750-pound sturgeon at New York's Fulton Fish Market. The enormous fish was caught off Virginia's coast and was nearly as long as the crowd standing behind it. In 1938, Russian white émigrés attended a field service before fighting for General Francisco Franco in the Spanish Civil War. They served with the Carlist unit Doña María de Molina, hoping Franco would later help them overthrow the Soviet government. On June 27, 1945, American and Japanese soldiers on Aka Island, Okinawa, stopped fighting and prayed together during an informal truce. Their extraordinary agreement spared local civilians from the destruction raging just 15 miles away. On May 25, 1940, a German Dornier Do-17 bomber crashed into this Belgian home. All 4 crew members and 2 civilians inside the house were killed. In 1986, 12-year-old Sian Kingi was abducted after stopping to help a couple search for a supposedly lost poodle. The Australian girl was then murdered in one of the country's most horrifying crimes. This rare card identifies Jos D. Kramer, who could stretch the skin of his neck several inches, a striking sign of extreme skin elasticity. Despite the printed name, no verified biography of Kramer has surfaced, leaving the man behind this disturbing photograph a mystery. On May 11, 1939, Nazi official Richard Forster preached Hitler's ideology to Korean schoolchildren aboard a train to Seoul. He handed them signed portraits of Hitler as they raised their arms in a Heil Hitler salute. In 1987, Soviet servicemen at Cam Ranh Bay staged this Vietnam War scene, posing as American soldiers for a group photo. The Soviet Union operated the former American base under a 25-year agreement signed with Vietnam in 1979. In 1951, photographer Bert Hardy captured 16-year-old hairdresser Betty Burden playing with children on a rubble heap near her Birmingham home. The bomb-scarred ground had become their playground, 6 years after the Second World War ended. Workers paved the Delaware River Bridge with asphalt shortly before it opened in 1926. Its 1,750-foot main span was then the longest suspension bridge span in the world, and the bridge was later renamed for Benjamin Franklin. After the Battle of Berlin in 1945, wrecked Soviet and German tanks were gathered across the ruined city. This field of burned armor shows the enormous cost of the final battle against Nazi Germany. On December 2, 1918, this eerie scarecrow dressed as a German soldier raised a white flag weeks after the First World War fighting ended. Its gas mask and empty uniform turned Germany's surrender into a chilling public symbol of defeat. In 1963, Henry Cooper dropped Muhammad Ali with a brutal left hook just before the bell. Ali later said the punch hit him even harder than Joe Frazier's famous knockdown in their first fight. These portraits show French boxer Fred Bretonel at 16 and 23 after years of punishment had transformed his face. He turned professional at 14, became European lightweight champion at 19, and died at only 23. In 1913, sailors used a crane and 2 small boats to load a torpedo onto the Russian battleship Slava. The explosive weapon had to pass through a narrow opening in the hull while men controlled its weight with ropes. Inside a Minsk prison workshop in 1957, inmates who missed production targets were named on a public board marked "Shame on the Lazy." Those who exceeded their quotas could receive better food, better housing, and rare multi-day visits from their wives. The Gakel 9, photographed at St. Petersburg's Korpus Noi airfield in 1912, was the world's first strut-braced monoplane. Powered by an 80-horsepower engine, this pioneering aircraft vanished months later when a mysterious fire destroyed its hangar. Soviet border guards raced through a mountain river on horseback in 1966. Horses let patrols cross rough terrain where vehicles could not go, helping guards reach remote sections of the Soviet frontier. An Iraqi civil servant walks to work past burned military vehicles in Baghdad in 2003. Even during the invasion, government employees were ordered to report for duty. Rat catchers pose with their terriers and dead rodents in London in 1953. These small dogs were trained to chase rats into the open and kill them quickly, helping control infestations where traps and poison failed. The Convair B-36 Peacemaker was so tall that crews used a powered conveyor to lift heavy ammunition into its upper gun turrets. Its defensive system carried 16 20mm cannons, making it the most heavily armed bomber ever built. In 1945, Soviet engineers in Moscow dismantled an American Boeing B-29 piece by piece to study its design. Stalin ordered an extremely close copy, and the result became the Tupolev Tu-4 bomber. The personal belongings of a Soviet soldier killed in Afghanistan during the 1980s include his helmet, rifle, ammunition, documents, and family photographs. Together, these ordinary objects reveal the identity and private life behind one battlefield death. A field in Normandy was covered with abandoned German helmets after Allied troops captured their owners in 1944. Each helmet marked one more soldier removed from the battlefield and sent to a prisoner of war camp. This German ambulance from Medical Transport Unit 562 was riddled with bullets in Ternopil during the summer of 1941. Even the large Red Cross markings failed to protect it from the brutal fighting. On April 9, 1969, Britain's first Concorde prototype flew from Filton to Fairford as crowds packed the road beneath its landing path. The historic maiden flight lasted just 22 minutes, beginning the British test program for the world's first supersonic passenger airliner. This portrait from Africa, taken around 1900, shows a young man with intricate raised scars carefully arranged across his face. Such scarification could mark identity, status, beauty, or important stages of life. But the exact meaning depended on his community. Russian immigrants arrive at Tel Aviv Airport on March 1, 1992, carrying everything they could bring from a collapsed Soviet Union. They joined a historic wave that brought nearly 1 million former Soviet citizens to Israel during the 1990s. On May 6, 1962, the submarine Carbonero watched a 600-kiloton nuclear blast through its periscope. The warhead had been launched from another submarine, making Frigate Bird the only American test of a complete ballistic missile system with a live nuclear warhead. A young Soviet soldier poses with a Kalashnikov rifle and a cigarette for a photo to send home from Afghanistan in the 1980s. These private snapshots often showed confidence and calm, hiding the brutal ambushes, mines, and mountain warfare faced beyond the camera. In September 1945, a Japanese artist sketched the ruins of Hiroshima only weeks after the atomic bomb destroyed most of the city. His drawing captured details that photographs could miss before the wreckage was cleared, and Hiroshima began rebuilding. In 2005, 9 military BAT-2 tractors dragged the 91-meter, 2,000-ton B-307 submarine across muddy ground to the Avtovaz Technical Museum. 7 years earlier, scenes from the film Peculiarities of the National Fishing were shot aboard this same submarine. This old Zanzibar postcard shows enslaved workers carrying a single enormous elephant tusk weighing more than 200 pounds, or over 90 kilograms. Ivory this large came from a mature African elephant and was exported through Zanzibar, once a major hub of the brutal ivory and slave trades. In 1896, divers in heavy metal helmets worked below the Yenisei River while a major bridge was being built. Air reached them through hoses from the surface, and one damaged line could turn the dangerous job into a deadly trap. A Soviet Tupolev SB bomber falls in flames near a crossing over the Berezina River in 1941. Once fast enough to outrun many fighters, the aircraft was dangerously vulnerable to modern German interceptors by the time of the invasion. In 1918, Italian forces raised this chain of barrage balloons to block enemy aircraft from key positions. Their steel cables could tear into low-flying planes, forcing pilots higher and making bombing far less accurate. In November 1979, Iranian students seized the United States Embassy in Tehran, taking 66 Americans hostage and soon releasing 13 women and black captives. The remaining 52 endured 444 days in captivity after a military rescue failed, and were freed through negotiations in January 1981. In 1811, massive earthquakes near New Madrid made the Mississippi River briefly surge backward, toppling boats and swallowing riverbanks. The shaking was so powerful that church bells reportedly rang more than 1,000 miles away in Boston. During the Spanish Civil War, this Republican soldier aimed an 8mm Steyr Mannlicher rifle despite having lost his left hand. He steadied the weapon on his bandaged stump, turning a severe disability into a remarkable battlefield technique. Smoke engulfs the battleship United States ship West Virginia after Japanese bombs and torpedoes tore it open at Pearl Harbor. Beside it, the United States ship Oklahoma lies capsized, trapping hundreds of sailors inside. From 1967 to 1968, Cultural Revolution violence in Guangxi triggered lynchings, massacres, and hundreds of reported acts of ritual cannibalism. Despite no famine, official investigations found that at least 421 victims were eaten. Japanese soldiers escort an Australian prisoner of war near Kavieng, New Guinea, in 1942. Many Allied prisoners held there were later executed, and their fate remained unknown until Japanese war crimes investigations uncovered the truth. In 1976, New Atlanta Braves owner Ted Turner raced an ostrich on the field to attract fans to his struggling team. His wild promotions also included bathtub races and a mass wedding followed by professional wrestling. On May 15, 1945, American soldiers escorted a captured Japanese fighter through Tabagon, Cebu. He belonged to the shattered 35th Army, whose survivors were still hiding across the island after their commander, General Sosaku Suzuki, was killed. On March 17, 1953, an atomic bomb exploded at Yucca Flat, sending this massive mushroom cloud over the Nevada desert. Radioactive fallout drifted east into Utah, where decades later it contributed to the leukemia that killed my grandfather, a healthy vegetarian and beloved math teacher. On this day in 1889, Wyoming ranchers kidnapped Ella Watson and James Averill and hanged them without a trial. Watson became known as Cattle Kate, but the rustling claims used to justify the killings were never proven. Eve Arnold photographed Marilyn Monroe on a playground in Mount Sinai, Long Island, in 1955. The vivid Kodachrome portraits promoted the 7-year itch and showed Marilyn relaxed and playful, far from her carefully controlled Hollywood image. In 1988, an Afghan resistance fighter aimed an American Stinger missile at a Soviet aircraft over eastern Afghanistan. These heat-seeking weapons allowed small guerrilla units to destroy low-flying jets and helicopters, sharply raising the cost of the Soviet air war. These Japanese soldiers faced trial in Burma in 1946 for massacring more than 1,000 villagers. Their numbered tags identified each defendant as the court investigated one of the deadliest wartime crimes committed against Burmese civilians. This is believed to be the last photograph of Bruce Lee, taken in July 1973, just days before his death. He died on July 20th at only 32 after a severe reaction to a painkiller caused swelling in his brain. In 1955, American soldiers sat inside a tank only 5 kilometers from a nuclear explosion during the Desert Rock exercises. Between 1951 and 1957, 37,000 troops trained in Nevada to fight on a radioactive battlefield. These eerie plague outfits covered doctors from head to toe while treating infected patients in the 1600s. The long beak was stuffed with herbs and spices because people wrongly believed pleasant smells could block the deadly disease. 17-year-old Walter Lunger lies wounded in a hospital after a bomb explosion. Nazi terrorists planted the device in Innsbruck in 1934, and the blast tore off his right hand. The Shandmantle was a heavy wooden barrel used to publicly punish people accused of crimes such as poaching or drunkenness. Forced to walk through town while trapped inside it, victims faced insults, rotten food, and total humiliation. Around 1954, Jennifer Hickling was photographed performing a forceful spinal manipulation in New Zealand. The striking image captures an early form of hands-on treatment, decades before modern safety standards transformed spinal care. A South Vietnamese soldier holds 2 suspected Viet Cong fighters at gunpoint in the swampy southern delta. The prisoners were searched, tied, and questioned before being taken to join other captives. At -43 degrees, Old Faithful blasted near boiling water up to 42 meters high, creating a huge cloud of steam and ice crystals. A Yellowstone park ranger captured this rare eruption early one winter morning in 1963. At the first Olympic women's basketball tournament in 1976, Japan's Sachio Yamamoto faced Soviet giant Uljana Semjonova, who stood 2 meters 10 tall. The Soviet Union won 98-75 and finished the tournament undefeated, claiming the first women's basketball gold medal. A Hitler Youth Orchestra rests near Berlin's Lustgarten during the May Day celebrations of 1933. The next day, Nazi stormtroopers seized Germany's trade union offices, arrested their leaders, and destroyed the independent labor movement. This 1932 wanted poster offered $200 for Clyde Barrow, already linked to 3 killings and several armed robberies. It warned that he was extremely dangerous and would not hesitate to kill, before Bonnie and Clyde became America's most notorious outlaw couple. In 1979, a 23-year-old apprentice embalmer stole a hearse in Sacramento with a dead man still inside and vanished for 2 days. Her confession described sex with 20 to 40 corpses, but California had no necrophilia law, so she received 11 days in jail and a $255 fine. In 1865, Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, David Harold, and George Atzerodt were hanged for conspiring in Abraham Lincoln's assassination. Surratt became the first woman executed by the United States government, reportedly saying, "Please do not let me fall." On November 20th, 1948, Jeffrey Orbell and Neil McCrosty held 2 takahe, a New Zealand bird believed extinct, for 50 years. Orbell found the hidden population by following strange tracks deep into the remote Murchison Mountains. Wounded and without a rifle, Hugh Miller survived alone on Japanese-held Arundel Island in 1943 and fought enemy patrols for weeks using captured grenades. He destroyed several machine gun positions before a Navy float plane rescued him, earning the Navy Cross and 2 Silver Stars. Soviet troops advanced past a wrecked German tank destroyer during the brutal East Prussian campaign of 1945. Königsberg fell after 4 days of street fighting, trapping tens of thousands of German soldiers beside the Baltic Sea. West Bromwich Albion goalkeeper John Osborne casually smoked a cigarette beside his goal during a match in 1972. At the time, players could even smoke on the pitch without stopping the game. Unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls, the Copper Scroll was engraved on metal and lists 64 places where treasure was supposedly buried. The hidden gold and silver could be worth billions today, but none of it has ever been confirmed. Persia's ruler Mozaffar al-Din Shah poses beside a dead leopard after a royal hunt in the late 1890s. Just a few years later, he brought cinema equipment to Persia and helped launch the country's film history. In 1948, a court clerk examined the Kentucky cabin where 37-year-old Raymond Ellison lived with his 12-year-old wife, Imogene Sims. Ellison had married the child to avoid statutory rape charges, but this photograph appeared after his arrest for her murder. Red Army assault engineers fight through Kustrin on March 12, 1945, wearing SN-42 steel body armor designed to stop bullets and shrapnel. The armor weighed about 8 pounds and protected the chest and groin, but left the soldiers dangerously exposed from the sides and back. This is the last known photo of Robert Wadlow, the tallest person ever recorded at 8 feet 11 inches. Taken on July 4, 1940, it shows him just 11 days before an infected leg brace killed him at only 22. This staged photo from North Africa in October 1941 shows German soldiers frying eggs on a tank's sun-heated armor. The image turned the desert's brutal heat into a striking wartime propaganda scene. Before the 1950s, a sex worker in a Galveston brothel scratched her earnings directly into this wall. The fading numbers offer a rare glimpse into the hidden economy of the city's notorious red light district. This photograph shows Tulsa's Greenwood district burning during the white supremacist massacre of May 31st and June 1st, 1921. Attackers killed as many as 300 people, destroyed over 1,000 homes, and left thousands homeless. At Heysel Stadium in 1985, Juventus fans were crushed against a collapsing wall while fleeing a charge by Liverpool supporters. 39 people died, and English football clubs were banned from European competitions for years. B-17 bombers of the 490th Bomb Group fly through dense German flak in 1944. Each black burst sent razor-sharp steel fragments across the formation, forcing crews to hold course because breaking formation made them easier targets for enemy fighters. Future war hero and French President Charles de Gaulle walks with his daughter Anne in the 1930s. Born with Down syndrome, she stayed with her family instead of being institutionalized and died from pneumonia in 1948, aged 20. Masked nurses treat an influenza patient at the United States Naval Hospital in New Orleans in 1918. The virus spread rapidly through crowded military camps, and influenza and pneumonia killed tens of thousands of American service members. This rare photograph shows Frederick Douglass and his second wife, Helen Pitts, visiting Niagara Falls in 1884. Their interracial marriage caused national outrage, but Douglass defended it by saying his first wife had his mother's color and Helen had his father's. During the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, some Dutch children attended lessons in open-air classrooms to reduce infection risk. Even in cold weather, they studied at wooden desks outdoors because fresh air was believed to slow the spread of disease. Before electronic gates, London Underground workers manually sorted mountains of used tickets to track where passengers entered and traveled. The results revealed traffic patterns and helped officials adjust train schedules to match demand. In 1904, Congolese teenager Ota Benga was taken to the United States and displayed at the World's Fair. 2 years later, The Bronx Zoo placed him inside its monkey house, and in 1916, after years of abuse and isolation, he took his own life. In 1968, engineers finished cutting the Abu Simbel temples into more than 1,000 massive blocks. They rebuilt them 65 meters higher, saving the ancient monuments from the rising waters created by the Aswan High Dam. On March 30, 1945, Soviet soldiers passed a burning house near Vienna, photographed by Yevgeny Khalday. Khalday later claimed that he and the soldiers deliberately set it on fire because a concentration camp commandant lived there. In 1985, Arctic ice crushed the hydrographic ship Aini near Vilkitsky Island in the Arctic Ocean. Photographer Sergei Burasovsky captured the wreck and its crew, standing beside the vessel that the frozen sea had torn apart. On November 10, 1943, Lieutenant Walt Tuning climbed onto a burning Hellcat after it crashed into the guns of the USS Enterprise. The pilot escaped without serious injury as the deck crew fought the flames around them. Lyle and Eric Menendez said years of sexual abuse by their father drove them to murder both parents in 1989. Sentenced to life without parole in 1996, they became eligible for parole after a 2025 resentencing. On July 10, 1985, French secret agents planted 2 bombs on the Greenpeace ship Rainbow Warrior in Auckland Harbor. The explosions sank the ship, killed photographer Fernando Pereira, and exposed a deadly French operation to protect nuclear testing in the South Pacific. On July 10, 1985, Aeroflot Flight 7425 stalled at high altitude and crashed near Uchkuduk. All 200 people aboard died, making it the deadliest aviation disaster in Soviet history. In 1948, Idaho dropped 76 beavers by parachute into remote mountain wilderness. Packed in specially designed wooden boxes, all but one survived, and the beavers quickly began building dams in their new home. On April 13, 1941, the German submarine U-108 torpedoed the armed merchant cruiser HMS Rajputana after a 3-hour battle in the North Atlantic. The converted passenger liner sank with 42 men, while 283 survivors escaped. On July 10, 1976, a reactor accident released a toxic dioxin cloud over Seveso, forcing hundreds of residents to evacuate. Thousands of animals died, and about 80,000 more were slaughtered to stop the poison from entering the food chain. This colorized photograph shows a German stormtrooper resting in a trench during the First World War. These elite assault soldiers carried grenades and light weapons, then struck weak points in enemy lines before heavier troops moved forward. Buckskin. Frank Leslie killed Billy Claiborne in Tombstone and married the widow of another man he had killed in self-defense. Years later, he murdered his lover in a drunken rage and received a 25-year prison sentence. In 1944, resistance courier Marianne Cohn was caught while guiding 28 Jewish children from France toward Switzerland. Although her forged papers identified her as Aryan, she refused freedom without the children and was murdered by the Gestapo on July 8, aged 21. In the summer of 1949, Japan's railways suffered 3 shocking events in just 6 weeks: a mysterious death, a fatal runaway train, and a deadly derailment. Known as the 3 Big Mysteries, the cases involve disputed evidence and unanswered questions that remain controversial today. An Italian bersagliere captures a British soldier emerging from a dugout in Libya in 1942. The elite bersaglieri served as fast-moving infantry, but North Africa forced them into brutal desert battles where fuel, water, and supplies often decided victory. On April 28, 1967, Muhammad Ali refused the military draft, saying he had no quarrel with the Viet Cong. He was stripped of his heavyweight title, convicted of draft evasion, and banned from boxing for more than 3 years before the Supreme Court overturned his conviction. Harry Gelbfarb survived a concentration camp, tuberculosis, and a heart defect before opening Germany's first bodybuilding gym in 1957. With no proper equipment or supplements available, he built weights from water pipes and made protein drinks from whey, brewer's yeast, and strawberries. Armed fighters patrolled Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War, a conflict that shattered the country from 1975 to 1990. The war drew in Syria, Israel, Palestinian groups, France, and the United States, leaving about 120,000 people dead and 1 million displaced. Joseph Stalin holds his daughter Svetlana in 1935, years before she escaped the Soviet Union and defected to the United States. She later described her father as a moral and spiritual monster whose cruelty destroyed everyone close to him. A little girl shakes hands with an American soldier in Villedieu-le-Poil, Normandy, in 1944. The town was liberated on August 2nd, after 4 years of German occupation. These American Legion members were photographed at Philadelphia's Bellevue Stratford Hotel in July 1976. Weeks later, a mysterious outbreak linked to the convention sickened more than 200 people and killed 34, leading scientists to discover the bacterium behind Legionnaire's disease. Hungarian border guards dismantled the electrified warning fence along the Austrian border on May 2, 1989. This quiet operation created the first physical breach in the Iron Curtain, months before East Germans began escaping through Hungary. On June 15, 1961, East German leader Walter Ulbricht declared that nobody intended to build a wall. Just 59 days later, East Germany sealed the border and began building the Berlin Wall, splitting families and trapping millions in the East. Be sure to write your impression in the comments.